Hey guys, this is a quick follow-up video of my previous video where I showed how we can handle different test environment configurations, and I think I made a mistake there, and the mistake was the implementation which I provided in test environment factory. Even though the instance for this test environment factory was unique, this getConfig method was called like as many times as you want to call this method would be called, and that is not what we want because all these steps that we have here, like loading the configuration, iterating through all these files, loading the configuration files for all those environments, and returning the config, all these are memory intensive steps. And actually, once we load the configuration, it is not going to change for the whole run. So actually, we want to only call this method once and not like multiple times. Just to demonstrate, if I run this test, let's see what happens. This is getConfig called, right? I have added this logging statement to see how many times this method is called. At this moment, it is only called once because I'm only calling this method one time, and then after we call this method, they put the configuration into a final configuration, and that's why it is not repeated. But if there are multiple test methods, right? Those multiple test methods will call this getConfig method multiple times. Like imagine if you have 10 test classes, all those 10 classes would call this method, and then you'll have 10 instances. Just to give an example, if I run this test, we will see 2 times this method being called. This is not what we want, right? And like imagine if you have 10 test classes, just to show an example, if I change this from test to repeated test, and let's call it 10 times. So imagine this test was present in like similar test or like whatever test which is parsing configuration is present in different test classes. If I run this again, you will see that getConfig is now called 20 times. Why? One time here, like 2 times in the same test, and because it is 10, 20 times. And of course these fields should be called like as many times as a test are, which is 10, which makes sense, but not this method, right? We don't want to call this method multiple times. So let's fix this. I think the way we can fix it is pretty easy. So let's create a private config field, which will basically hold the value of this field, and rather than calling it getConfig, let's call it as setConfig. So setConfig called, and let's change this to using this config equals to config factory.load. And when we are basically calling this constructor once, that's the time actually we can set this configuration as setConfig. So this will make sure that when this instance is being created, that is also the time this configuration is being set, right? And now all we need to do is add another method, which is basically return config. And if we call this method now, what it is giving is whatever config was set when this constructor was called the first time, that is the configuration that you're going to get. Let's go back and let's run this test case again. Remember, when we ran it last time, it was called 20 times. If we run the same test again, we expect it only to be called 1 times. And let's see, okay, so that the method is undefined for the type test environment factory. Let me clean up the target just to be sure. Also, let's go here, public, let's make this one as private, right? And let's run this again. Let's see, building it again, cleaning all the cache, everything seems to be working fine. And now if I look for setConfig called, only called once, and like you can see, even though I used exactly the same statement in 2 lines here, it is not called multiple times. And This is exactly what we want, right? So guys, this was a quick video, but it demonstrates that the in the previous example that I showed of setting up the singleton pattern, I made a mistake. So even though this object instance was a singleton, we also wanted this method to be called once and not multiple times, because this is all memory uh, intensive task, and we only want to do it once, and we want this config, which is what we capture once, to be available for the whole run, all the test cases, all the test classes. So quick one, but I hope this makes it more clear to you, like how to implement singleton patterns in a more efficient manner, right? So with this, I will wrap up the video. I will push the code into GitHub so that you can also just directly pull it for your own reference. And that's it. See you guys. Have a good day. Bye bye.